Ferruccio Bortoluzzi was born in Venice in 1920. Bortoluzzi is self-taught and an authentic Venetian artist. The city's colours clearly inspired the works of his youth. However, he remains detached from the airy, transparent visions of so many painters of Venetian scenes. His first study was situated in the Three Eyes House, a unique building meant to realise the impossible dream of painter Mario de Maria.
This is where I began my activity as a painter, right here in this little, grand studio.
Questo è fatto con non su tela, ma su un sacco.
This oil painting wasn't done on canvas, but on sacking material. At that time, there on the island of Giudecca, I was often short of money, not to say always. It was impossible for me to buy canvases, so I used the sacks in which they carried coal from house to house.
He was hardly more than 20 years old when he exhibited his first works at the Bevilacqua La Masa Foundation in St. Mark's Square. The younger Bortoluzzi emerges as a figurative painter. The colour which he applies to his canvas is opaque, frozen under a poignant weight of melancholy. Unusual landscapes these, sketched onto dark brown backgrounds. He paints lonely, windowless houses. The brushstroke is determined, harsh. Colour combinations are daring, thrown into play as they are with subtle variations of ochre reds and burnt sienna. The artist continued to study art history in depth. During that period, he drew still lifes on rough paper. These works are unusual in their harsh bidimensional discipline. Illuminated by off-whites, dummies animate a bare room. Half-sunk boats stand out like coffins, blades penetrating the lagoon, lifeless and anguished, like those dramatic years of resistance and liberation. In a Venice fervid with the enthusiastic hopes of the first years following the war, we find Bortoluzzi among the founders of Arco, the Centre for Cultural Unity, an association bringing together painters, sculptors, actors, writers, musicians and poets. This small group of friends included people of varying political inclinations, all of them linked by a grand will for renewal after the 20-year period of fascism. From 1947 to 1954, the artist lived in isolation, forced to carry out work he did not love. He began to face new challenges. Taking a distance from naturalism, Bortoluzzi found self-expression in images created from his mind and from memory. In the 1950s, he created countless drawings in which the use of coloured pastels and charcoals predominated. The theme of Christ's deposition from the cross recurred frequently in those years. The crucifixion theme is a poetic constant for the artist. Many years later, Bortoluzzi would take up the same theme in a disquieting way.
Le crocifissioni.
In his rare oil paintings, the background is composed of silver shades, metallic ones, that may even become repelling. The cross appears as seen from above, an elongated form, a wedge sunk into the ground, emerging from the dense mass of energy constituted by the disciples. In other compositions, human figures appear bent by fatigue on boards resembling tombstones. Grey is among the artist's favourite colours. Grey means stopping to reflect on the polarities between black and white, and on the infinite shades existing between the two extreme solo notes. In innumerable indoor scenes, black chairs emerge, set around an empty table, an enigmatic representation of failed encounters. During those years, Bortoluzzi surprised his acquaintances by approaching black culture. The theme of racial segregation, of violence, of a denial of humankind, emerges with extraordinary foresight in several charcoal drawings. Personal meditations, which cite and echo European and Latin American painting of various periods and styles. Bortoluzzi suddenly converts to new modes of expression. The artist creates works using boards of old wood that the artist scavenges from the roof galleries of ancient palaces and in the shipbuilding squarey of Venice. His is a discovery happened upon by chance, suggested by the urban environment frequented by the artist. Now his pictures become objects, material compositions. Rusty pieces of iron, chains, locks, rings attached to panels of plywood. These form original compositions, unprecedented in kind. To most, Bortoluzzi's work seemed extravagant. Few perceived in the artist's compositions a coherent quest, one refusing any recourse to chance and to the facile pleasure of shocking the viewer. Bortoluzzi's compositions created a scandal in a sleepy provincial Venice, so reluctant to accept new modes of expression. Cut with insistent determination, sheets of metal take on form. Chains stretch out, becoming symbols. Such emblems shout out their message, even while remaining aesthetic in form. In the prayer composition, 27 panels that are repeated, all the same, in a series like the grains of a rosary, and yet different and precious each one, like an individual prayer. During those years, Bortoluzzi presented numerous exhibits in Italy and abroad. In 1966, he was invited to participate in the 23rd Biennale of Contemporary Art. In 2001, the Querini Stampalia Foundation dedicated a one-man show of his works, ranging from the earlier to more recent ones. On that occasion, a monographic work was published which the artist dedicated to Giuseppe Mazzariol. In March 2003, the International Gallery of Modern Art at Ca' Pesaro held an important exhibition dedicated entirely to Bortoluzzi's works. Venice thus honoured an artist who is reluctant to step into the limelight. In the grand main hall of Palazzo Pesaro, the poor materials collected by Bortoluzzi acquire a peculiar dimension. We cannot decide whether the rust and the mould are wrecks or relics, signs of a tragic decadence or symbols of homage to memory. He thus presents his most recent works. Dizziness, astonishment at these 83 years of mine. A life of work, research, solitude. The dream, perhaps only an illusion, of communicating with others. Black drapings, ropes, knots calling up the memory of the Franciscans, rings to deliver oneself up into freedom or imprisonment. You will not find faces in them, effigies, but rather symbols, letters from a secret alphabet, personal and indecipherable. Signs suspended in the emptiness of Byzantine forms. Like the triptych, the celebration of the end, intentionally ambiguous. An altar that is both secular and religious at the same time.
Questa è una carta bruciata.
In the years that followed, Bortoluzzi developed other interesting research. In the atelier of his friend, Fiorenzo Fallani, the artist created an unusual series of 3 silkscreen works on wood panels. He worked intensely, producing a series of collages with thin, shiny and opaque sheets of paper. This was a contemplative stage, an austere one, bearing witness to the elderly artist's will to experiment.
Misurare l'arte è impossibile. Ultimamente una conferenza all'arte e scienza.
Recently, I attended a lecture. They talked, the others talked, about the relation between art and science. I remember a young man who must not have been older than 20. He spoke up, expressing his own ideas, and I was very moved.
Sapeva veramente in parole semplici dire.
No one was able to define art in simple words. Art is a mystery. There are no words to explain or define art. In science, 2 plus 2 is 4. In art, 2 plus 2 is never 4.
Nell'arte 2 più 2 non fa mai 4. E quindi questa è stata la mia risposta.